Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. I hope you all are doing well and had a great week. Today, we're doing 3 scary security guard stories. I may also be doing a live stream next week, but I'll make an announcement over the weekend if I can or not. With that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. I work the graveyard shift as a security guard for a hospital, and I do have some stories to tell. First, let me fill you in on the general layout of the campus. The main building is divided into 2 parts. The first part consists of a ground-level emergency department, an operating room on the first floor, and a childbirthing center on the second floor, and the second part holds the patient units. There are 7 floors here, and each wing is used by various patient classes: cardiac, behavioral, pediatric, etc. Apart from the main building is the McCam building, which is a historic structure that used to serve as a nursing school back in the late 1800s. It was a rectangular square building that was used partially for classes, partially for dormitories. Presently, it is used for an office space for handling management needs and things of the sort. It is only open during the day though, unlike the rest of the hospital, which operates 24/7. My main duty as a security guard is to handle disorderly patients, who are usually having psychotic breakdowns or high on drugs, and to patrol the premises and make sure nothing is out of the ordinary. The exterior of the campus can get a little creepy at night, and my eyes are always peeled for wild animals, especially coyotes. Truth be told, I'd rather spend my entire shift outside with the coyotes than spend 5 minutes inside McCam. I have to check it out at least once a night though, and I always make sure to bring my coworker with me. We hurriedly scan the building's 4 floors and move on without a second glance. We both agree that the place gives us the creeps. The hospital staff like to chatter about how hospitals are haunted places. It's reasonable. There's at least 1 death per day at the hospital I work at. Assumption coupled with a tired mind can give one the impression of spotting a ghost as it makes its journey to the other side. I've never seen anything remotely paranormal during my shift, let alone my life. My coworker swears he's seen unexplained shadows move out of the corners of his eyes. Our perspectives changed the night we decided to play the stupidest game ever. I was sitting in my office with my coworker, Frank, shooting the shit. Our office was located just outside the emergency department, where we directed lost family members to the rooms of their respective relatives. On this particular night, a mutual buddy of ours, Mark, popped his head in. Mark was obsessed with ghosts, and the topic inevitably made its way into our conversation. "You guys ever seen anything when you go through McCam?" he began. We both shook our heads. "You know that's the most haunted place, right?" I rolled my eyes. "Mark, not this again." "It's true. You know that it used to be a nursing school. Well, apparently, it was a wicked tough one. Exams were brutal. They were so brutal that the nursing students began to off themselves because they were afraid of failing out." "That's dumb," I said. "There was this one group of nursing students. It was around 1910. I can't remember the exact year. But they were so scared of failing their exam that they made a suicide pact. They all jumped from the roof and died right there in front of the entrance." I looked at him, dumbfounded. "Seriously? That's a load of crap." Mark regarded me with wide eyes. "You don't believe me?" "Not one bit." "Do you know the glass cabinet with the creepy dolls on the ground floor?" I knew exactly what he was talking about. Near the main entrance there's a glass cabinet that displays 5 homemade dolls that are dressed up as nurses. They stood 14 inches tall and wore those old school nursing outfits, you know, with the red crosses. I never gave them further inspection, because there was something unsettling about them. There have been problems of hooligans stealing them in the past, but never on my watch. They were indeed creepy, watching me as I did my rounds through McCam. "Well, they say that the souls of those nurses became trapped in the dolls. 5 students, 5 dolls. They say that if you go up to the third floor, stand outside room 333 and knock on it 3 times, so the third strike lands just as the clock turns 3:33. The dolls will play hide and seek with you." I laughed out loud at this. Mark shifted uncontrollably. I looked over at Frank, who was also silent. "Come on, Frank, you can't be actually buying this." "I heard about it too," Frank mumbled. I don't know how the two of them convinced me to try out this foolish experiment. It was obviously a ghost story fabricated by some bored staff member who wanted to get a rise out of his coworkers. But before I knew it, I was standing outside of room 333 in the McCann building with Frank and Mark. It was 3:32 in the morning, and I felt like a fool. "Well, here goes nothing," I said, as I rapped on the wooden door 3 times. The sound echoed through the dark hallway and faded away. I checked my watch. It was 3:33. We waited in silence for a few moments. I braced myself for something, but nothing came. "Come on, let's go." I heard a door close downstairs, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I looked at the other two, who were equally as shaken. I grabbed Mark firmly by the shoulders. "Are you screwing with us?" I hissed. "Is someone pulling a prank on us?" Mark violently shook his head. I could see the terror in his eyes as my flashlight illuminated his face. "We need to check it out. Could be a trespasser. I hope." We slowly descended onto the first floor. As we came into the hallway, I wondered how frightened we looked. I led the way with Frank close behind him, while Mark was literally glued to his ass. We probably resembled some demented version of the mystery gang. I flashed my light on all the doors. None were open. My light came to the cabinet, and my heart leapt into my throat. Yep, they were gone. "Screwed now, boys," Mark said softly, and crossed himself. I turned to him. "Mark, I swear to God, if you're pulling a fast one on us, I'll throw you off the roof myself." When I said these words, a chill swept throughout me. The temperature must have suddenly dropped 10 degrees, and I shivered. The air itself almost felt depressed. A whisper drifted through my ear. It started, "We have to find them, or something bad will happen." It was Frank. "Can you feel it? The negative energy?" I could. I motioned towards the nearest door. "Come on," I said. We crept around the first floor, opening each door with great anticipation, not knowing what was in store for us. To my relief, the floor was empty. There was still no sign of the dolls. We gathered in the hallway and were about to make our way up to the second floor when we heard a slight patter above us. It sounded like 3 or 4 children were running over ahead. Down the hallway towards us. A pause. Then in the opposite direction. This happened 3 times. Then it stopped. "Shit," I thought to myself. "Oh, screw that," Mark whimpered and turned toward the door. My hand shot out and found his elbow. "Don't be a wimp. We're in this together." I could see Mark's face glistening with sweat and his eyes wide with terror. We climbed the stairway with great caution. We clung to each other in fear, savoring each breath as if it were our last. When we came to the hallway, we were greeted by the slight tinkling of bells. The source was coming from a far end of the hallway. I shone my light into the darkness. Nothing. The faint tinkle warmly greeted us. I wanted to turn and run, but something was drawing me in. I slowly led the group toward the sound. I reached one of the doors and stopped. I motioned in my ear and pointed beyond the door. The other 2 nodded. I gripped the doorknob and slowly let myself in. On the other side of the door was a bathroom. It was one of those old dormitory bathrooms with a rounded sink in the middle and undivided latrines on both sides. In the porcelain sink were 3 dolls. I cautiously approached them and slowly extended my hand, as if the merest touch would set my hand on fire. I picked one up. It wore a white nurse's dress with a red cross on the right breast. On its head was a white cap with another red cross. Its black hair fell over its face, covering the features. I swept its hair back to reveal a faded, smiling face. Its porcelain skin was icy cool to the touch. I shuddered. We each returned a doll to the cabinet. 2 to go, I told myself. Mark and Frank were silent, exhausted from the terror of the night. I was relieved that they were with me. If I had to do this by myself, I think I would have lost my mind. "Do you think we ought to split up?" whispered Frank. "Cover more ground that way." I wheeled around and faced him. "No! Don't you watch horror movies? No matter what happens, we cannot split up. If the entity is malevolent, it'll kill us when we're alone. If anything, we should tie a rope around us so we don't get separated." My logic trumped their fearful state. Besides, I felt much better with Frank and Mark close by. Glued at the hip, we went to the 3rd floor and inspected it thoroughly. We couldn't find any dolls, and I kept my ears pricked for any noises. When the 3rd floor seemed safe, we climbed to the 4th floor. While in the stairwell, the sound of running footsteps greeted us again. We must be getting closer to another one. As we stepped into the hallway, the footsteps faded, and we watched the door slam shut, making all 3 of us jump in unison. What came next made my balls crawl up into my body. You know that cheesy child's laugh in the Roller Coaster Tycoon? The one you hear over and over again, which makes you want to punch that kid in the face? Well, hearing that same laugh now filled me not with frustration, but with terror. Raw, uncensored terror. To my left, Mark was praying. Frank remained as stoic as ever. Together, we inched our way towards the door that had closed moments before. I braced myself and opened it, expecting the worst. Nothing came, and I looked inside. The room was empty, save for a ladder that disappeared into a hole in the ceiling. The night sky greeted us. Of course, they would hide on the roof. After a quick game of rock, paper, scissors, Frank climbed the ladder first, with me close behind. We stepped onto a small stone patio. From the roof of the McCann building, the main part of the hospital looked quite inviting. I caught myself wishing that I was in my office and not playing this stupid game. "Look, there!" Frank pointed to a small figure in the corner of the patio. The doll was propped up against the stone railing that overlooked the main entrance. I picked the doll up and looked over the railing. It didn't look so high from here. I wondered if I leapt from here, that I'd survive. I grasped the railing and began to hoist myself up when Frank called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" I froze. What the hell was I doing? A spell of vertigo gripped me as I backed away from the railing. Did I seriously just consider jumping off? I shook it off. "Come on," I said sullenly. "Let's go find that last doll." We searched my camp for what seemed like hours. We thoroughly swept through the 4 floors twice without any luck. I was starting to feel more irritated than annoyed. The strangest part was that there were no more weird noises. I started to question if there were only 4 dolls to begin with. If there was a 5th doll, we would have to start tearing up the floorboards to find it. Our search for the 5th doll came to an anticlimactic conclusion when the sun's rays made their way into the hallway, filling it with a lavender glow. A wave of relief rushed through me, but in the back of my mind, I still regretted that we never found that last doll, if it ever existed. Things started to get weird since we played that game. Every morning around 3:33, I hear the pitter-patter of small feet run by my office. Or if I'm on patrol, I hear a child giggling. These things always last a couple of moments, but it always scares me when it happens, even though I expect it. I have returned to my cams since that night, but there are only 4 dolls on display behind the glass. I could have sworn there were 5. Come find me. I'm still alive. I still hear the noises every night. They have even been occurring in my own house. Where can I find help? I was told the facility's contents were above my pay grade. I was just a security guard who let the government agents, or G-men as I called them, through the front gate. They came and went in an endless stream of perfectly tailored gray suits and hats. After they marched through the gate, they disappeared within the featureless doors. There was nothing to break the monotony, not even a card that wouldn't scan, or a G-man asking for help. Everything operated with complete, bleak efficiency, and all I did was press a button. I used to wonder what was inside that facility. I don't anymore. Speculation was futile, and all my questions were ignored. No one was willing to talk. I wasn't even allowed a phone to pass the time. Instead, I contented myself with books, and reading became part of my routine. For 20 years, I guarded the gate that didn't need guarding. It was a life comfortable, but dull, and the books I read became a blur in my mind. I fantasized about office jobs with inconsiderate coworkers and unreasonable deadlines. I envied the underpaid retail workers who had the thrill of loud, rude customers. Anything had to be better than this. But still, I stuck to my job. In retrospect, it wasn't a bad living. It was better to be bored and sleepy than scared. It all began with the G-Man whose card wouldn't scan. I was halfway through a book, eyes half closed, but the beeping of the scanner made me look up. The G-Man seemed surprised. He paused, as if struggling to adapt to this sudden inconvenience in his perfectly efficient, top-secret routine. Then, he procured a working backup card, and I was already opening the gate before my half-asleep brain could respond. He was gone, and I realized I had no idea what my book was about, so I started over from the beginning. The next day, the same thing happened. The same beeping aroused me. I let the G-Man through, and then he was gone. But I knew something wasn't right. It was 2 failed scans in 2 days when before there were none. I was awake for the rest of the day. I looked closely at everyone who came. The same perfectly tailored gray suits and hats. The same perfect efficiency. But look, doesn't this one's tie seem a bit crooked? His suit has a small blemish. He's walking too fast, isn't he? Over the next week, there was no more beeping, but every G-Man that arrived seemed a little more disheveled and hurried than the last. Some of them were practically straining to cross the gate before they had scanned their card, and they all carried guns. Had they all carried guns before? Then another card didn't scan. The G-Man produced his backup card in a flourish, but instead of opening the gate, I turned on my microphone and asked hoarsely, "What's going on?" The G-Man replied, "That's none of your business." He was glaring at me, daring me to ask another question. I let him through. It was my job, after all. When another card didn't scan, I didn't bother. As the G-Man reached for his pocket, I pressed the button. He hesitated, shooting me a glance, then hurried through the open gate. For some reason, I felt vindicated. I'd surprised him, interrupted his routine. That was when the rumbling started. At first, I refused to believe it, but it was unmistakable. The facility was emitting a low rumbling, and a steady drone filled the air. The G-Men were getting scared. They arrived missing ties and gripping guns. As the rumbling began interspersed with loud banging and crackling, they became increasingly tense and agitated. Whatever was in the facility, it was out of their control. For a while, I was excited. Their routine was in tatters. Their perfect efficiency gone to hell. The G-Man had made me suffer in monotony, and now whenever I benevolently opened the gate, it was with deep satisfaction. They were getting panicked, careless. When my shift ended, I began finding lost things on the ground, an oily ring, a shattered loop, a blood-stained handkerchief. I brought them back. The rumbling became a backdrop in my mind, low-sounding and ever-present. I could see nothing from the outside, but the sound never went away until I left. Tonight, that changed as well. As I drove home, I almost didn't notice that the rumbling followed. The highway seemed deserted, but when I became aware of the rumbling, I glanced in the mirror. There was a dark figure following the road behind me, and it was rapidly gaining distance. I slammed on the brakes and dove out of the door. My handgun was already cocked, and it flashed once, twice, again. The figure fell to the ground, and I ran over, switching on my flashlight to shine on the body. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. It was a G-Man with a perfectly tailored suit and hat, immaculate save for the hole in the middle. The handkerchief in the suit's front pocket was stained blood red. I would have reached into his pocket, except there was a loud bang, and looking up, I saw some more silhouettes in the far distance coming my way. I jumped back into my car and fled. That was hours ago. I'm safely home now, but I can still hear a faint rumbling. I really shouldn't go back to work tomorrow. Yet, there's some strange desire in me to go back. I have a job to do, after all. It was a year ago next week when I got a call back from my manager, Ted, saying that I had gotten an interview to work at my large regional hospital here in Utah. In honor of my 1-year anniversary at work, I thought I would share one of my creepier security calls with you all. A call I received on my second day on the job. I was, and still am, a student at a large university, and being a poor, ramen almost every meal college student, it was a dream come true when my roommate, a nursing student, called me about an opening at the hospital he had just learned of. I was doing everything in my power to come out of college debt-free, but a college education is pretty expensive, and my flight school of choice to become a commercial pilot is going to run me about $80,000. Needless to say, I was looking for a few jobs to help me along. My interview went about as well as I could have hoped. The interview was conducted by a retired police officer named Ted, a grandpa whose warm eyes and a jolly temperament were comforting. I was asked about my academics, work history, which included a short time with my university's police force, and I was run through a physical fitness test and scenarios gauging how I would react. After being told that I had passed their interview and got the job, I remember asking lightheartedly how a job that paid $15.32 an hour and covered weekends could be vacant for a few months. My question was cut off by a sudden change in atmosphere, as if someone had suddenly opened a window to the cold, frozen air outside. "Oh, one more thing, CavalierRigg. You don't believe in ghosts, do you?" My chuckle and smile faded from my mouth as a laid-back Ted, who had done my interview with complete relaxation and ease, was now staring at me seriously. All previous warmth had been replaced by the grizzled scowl of a retired cop. I felt my blood begin to slowly ice over as the fear from this seemingly random question caught me off guard. My mind raced to make sense of my world as I processed the question. Did he just ask me if I think ghosts are real? What the hell? The question itself is strange enough, but why is Ted so tense? Why did he look almost... angry isn't the right word. Disturbed? Maybe. But why is he so forward with asking such a seemingly unprofessional thing? No, I don't, sir. Are you sure? He repeated himself with even more sternness than his original question. Yes, Ted, I am sure. Okay then, you've got the job. I will see you Friday night. My shiny black boots clawed down the fake wood flooring of the hospital as I made my rounds. My metal badge felt heavy on my uniform, as my radio earpiece kept getting caught on its edges. I looked pretty good, if I do say so myself. My radio, keys, and taser all hung off on the right side of my utility belt, as my work phone and flashlight hung off of my left. This was my second day on the job, and my first day, I was walking around the hospital by myself. The night before Friday, I had been guided around by Devin, a senior security officer, who had shown me around the winding and twisting halls of the hospital. Now with Devin responding to an emergency helicopter landing out of the helipad, I was left alone to navigate the labyrinth. It was approximately 2:15 a.m. when the phone's tone blared to life at full blast, snapping my eyelids to attention. I had been sitting at my desk with the plasma screens displaying countless feeds from the interior and exterior security cameras when I had started to doze off slightly. I answered the phone in the most official tone I could muster, trying to hide any sleepiness in my voice. "Security, how can I help you?" "Hello, you've reached the hospital security. Do you need help?" "Hello? Can you hear me?" My manner shifted from urgency to mild annoyance at the thought of getting a pocket dial from a nurse's work phone. All I could hear was silence and ambiance static on the other end, no indication that someone needed my help. I looked at the in-house phone number, and it was instantly confused. 72493. The sevens at the front of the number mean that it's a landline. I thought to myself as I cupped the phone with my shoulder and ear as I looked through my notepad. Just as my mind began to falter in making sense of the situation, I heard a faint voice of what sounded like an elderly woman over the line. Hello? Oh, hello. Sorry, I'm a little new and I couldn't hear you. This is hospital security. How can I help you? Where am I? Ma'am, are you lost? How can I help you? It's cold, and I don't know where I am. Please come help me. I heard the soft click of the line being hung up. While I was confused, I wasn't without sense of the situation. I had been briefed that since this was a hospital, we often had a lot of old, senile inpatients, patients that stayed overnight at the hospital, that would sometimes get out of their beds and wander, thus getting lost. While in most of these situations, it would be a nurse or a tech calling me about a missing patient, and calling an adult code pink, hospital code for a missing patient. The landline phones, if picked up, would automatically begin dialing security if no buttons were pressed for a few seconds. All the landline phones in the hospital did this, and they are all marked as such. It was not of the realm of possibility an elderly woman had gotten lost and called me. I looked up on my interactive map where the line 72493 was, and it gave me a location. South Tower, 2nd floor, room 5. I jogged down the halls to the elevator of the South Tower, determined I was going to find whoever had called me. I came out of the elevator and rounded the corner. I stood in shock as I read the plaque on the door near number 5. Morgue, employee clearance required. Red flags and warning alarms were going off in my head. How could a patient have gotten into the morgue? The doors need a badge scan to get in. How could she have gotten in? I felt my heart rate climbing as recalled that the elderly woman on the phone mentioned something about being cold. I shuddered at that thought, but I scanned my badge and entered the dark room. I would be damned if I was going to lose my job because an old lady got lost, called me, and I didn't do anything about it. The door gave a loud click as I walked into the dark morgue. The hum of the large silver freezers to my left filled the silent room with an ominous electric noise. The small circle of my flashlight illuminated the room as I attempted to find the switch to turn on the lights, but to no avail. The light reflected off the sterile, steel autopsy tables in the middle of the room, causing long shadows to distort themselves on the walls. My boots made a betrayingly loud smack as I walked on the tile towards the doctor's office, where I assumed the phone would be on. On the right, shelves and racks of jars of liquids and what I can only imagine to be samples lined the wall, giving off a sickly smell of formaldehyde. As I approached the closed door to the doctor's and autopsy record room, I noticed a faint glow of light coming from under the door. A shadow moved across the room, back and forth in a slow yet sporadic way, as I could tell there was someone moving inside. My patient! I knocked on the door, only to see the shadow move closer to the door, almost completely obstructing the light from the office. Hospital security, please open up the door! Where am I? The female voice from earlier replied back in the same quiet tone as on the phone. Ma'am, you're in a secure part of the hospital. I'm here to take you back to your room. Your nurse will want to see you. I replied warmingly to help ease some of her fears she had, no doubt, been feeling. Suddenly, darkness engulfed the bottom of the door as I heard a loud thump on the floor in the other room. Adrenaline pumping through my veins, I pressed the red emergency button on my radio, which instantly connected me to the hospital dispatch PBX operator, to which I called for a rapid response to the South Tower, Floor 2, Room 5, for a possible cardiac arrest. I ripped the radio off my belt to get to my keys as it blasted 5 loud chirps that help was on the way. I placed my flashlight on the cold autopsy table, the light facing the door, as I fumbled with my keys to unlock the door. As I jammed the master key into the lock, I turned it hard as the tumbler gave way to the force, slammed the door handle down as I nearly ripped the door off its hinges to find nothing. There was absolutely nobody in the room, and the soft glow of the room was not from the light, but from the computer screen in the corner which glowed a soft blue from the Windows 10 login screen. I walked in, my back bathed in the light from my flashlight on the table behind me, seeing if she had crawled further into the room behind a wall of one of the 2 cubicles in the room, only to find it empty. The cold, still air filled with silence as my radio went quiet after having given off its confirmation that help was on the way. Click, Suddenly, the room went dark as I heard my flashlight being turned off in the other room. The room was so still and quiet in that moment that not even the freezer's hum could silence my deafening heartbeat. I swung around. Liquid fear coursed through my body as I backed up to the wall, drawing my taser and flicking the on switch as the battery charged my weapon to life. I don't know what was in the main room of the morgue, but there was something there. The computer's soft glow illuminated the pure horror in front of me. The outline of a shadow figured as it glided close to the door silently, facing toward me. The figure was smaller, maybe 5'6", and had completely trapped me in the small office. Seeing the small green ready light on the display of my taser, I pressed the arc button, which sent a current down the metallic prongs of my weapon, lighting the wall with a white glow. In that brief few seconds, I saw a figure illuminated, a pasty white woman with dark holes for eyes, standing barefoot in a hospital gown. I screamed as the figure seemingly lurched forward in a falling motion, causing me to drop down and climb under the computer desk for protection where I blacked out. I woke up the next morning in a hospital bed with Ted sitting beside me, the clock reading 7:30 a.m. beside me. He looked at me with sad eyes as tears began to roll down my cheeks. Ted sat up and pulled his chair close to me, calmingly asking, "Did you see her?" I relayed my whole story to him, as he calmly sat and listened, never interrupting. After my story, he took a deep sigh and explained that 30 years ago, an older woman with dementia had blinded herself, and claimed a demon in the hospital had attempted to enter her body. When she died of a heart attack a few months later, the doctors in the morgue claimed that her body began to decompose rapidly even in the freezer, and that strange sounds could be heard in the machine, and later, in the building itself. Ted told me that the hospital's cardiac rapid response team had found me up there passed out, to which they brought me to the ER, where they admitted me to the hospital. Ted reluctantly told me that every so often, we will get a call from the phone up in the morgue between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. That we are under no circumstances to answer, and that Devin should have told me, because the occurrence is just so unorthodox. No official reports are ever filed when we see, hear, or receive calls or reports about her from the other staff members. Despite seriously considering quitting that day, I decided to stick with it and stay strong. The hours are still good, and the pay is great. Now, as I look at my past year working here at the hospital, I can honestly say it's not too bad. I have seen that entity twice since then, but now I can honestly say that I'm not scared anymore. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm getting a security call, and it's from line 72493. Thanks for listening, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your own story, the links for my email and subreddit will be down below. I've also created a Discord, so if you want to join that, the link will be in the description down below as well. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And with that said, have beautiful nightmares, and I will see you next time.